A thing to consider that I completely forgot about was how will your game look like and how will it load the first time someone opens it? I was getting ready for a submission for a build, and I just happened to play a few demos that are made in Unreal, and I noticed that sometimes they're popping in kind of like what's happening right now on my screen. And this is an old build, so the shaders hadn't been compiled in a long time. And I also had new drivers in the meantime. You load in and maybe the character can't be seen, and it might not seem like an issue because the second time that you play it, it seems completely fine. So there's no stutter, nothing pops in, and everything is ready and your shaders are all fine. So how I fixed my issue was essentially just holding the loading screen longer as the shaders are compiling. I used to not have a loading bar and it just looked like the game was busted. No one's gonna wait 1 minute at a dark screen. They might think that your loading screen is broken. So it's good to give some feedback to how your game is loading. So in this case, the main menu, nothing popped. And then when I get into the game, I added a new loading screen for the game, and especially since it's a demo, so it's nice to have something to read while the level is loading. And then I kind of transition it just to a confirmation widget so that if the loading is super fast, then the person can still hit play. But when you think about it, for a demo, a player is probably only going to play it once, and so you don't want to leave a terrible impression when everything is just popping in and out or stuttering. But at the same time, you don't want them to just be looking at a loading screen and give up. An example of really cool loading screen that I enjoyed was Inifinity Nikki. I think they have a pre-recorded video in the background, and so far, I think it's like 30 seconds and it just loops. That's pretty awesome. I really like also the loading screen in Crypt Custodian, which is a fantastic game, by the way. So essentially what I did is I followed the Unreal documentation that we're recommending to set up the initial loading screen with PSO pre-cache requests in mind. If you want to have all this information and understand more what's happening, I'll be posting all these 3 links. This one is pretty much where I found my code. The next thing I needed to do was figure out where do I want to put that code. One that was super useful was this talk from the Unreal Engine channel from Ari, which is a very, very good presenter. It will explain more of where they found the issue with the stutters that Unreal game had and how it was fixed after 5.3, or at least was set up to cache some shaders at the start of your game. So this is really, really interesting. I had to watch it, I think twice, to understand it a little bit more because it goes really deep. There's also the attached documentation from this video here. And it sort of explains how the drivers save shaders, why it takes longer to load the first time. It mentions a lot of times the loading screen. So far it seems like a pretty good solution, other than just having less shaders and me understanding a little bit more. So I'm using Lyra as a base, but this should also work for your project even if you're not using it. And I totally recommend using Lyra's common loading screen plugin and just seeing how Lyra uses it so you can use it too. But essentially what I just did is I added a progress bar to the loading screen reason debug text. If I go to the logic, the only logic I added to the loading screen manager is I just added a float for having the percentage done, and also if it should show the progression bar, and then I just update the percentage of that progress bar. I just made sure that I'm ready for if ever there's any other reason that there's a bar, like let's say the world partition is loading or there's something else that's loading. It's nice to have the option to show the user a progress bar. Okay, and then if I go from there, I'm just gonna double click on get percentage done. So those are the functions that I added, and it's just a float. And then I also have a bowl for show progress. And I won't go too much into detail, but essentially the only thing that was important is how do I set this progress and when. I used to use that code that I showed earlier directly inside of the loading screen manager, but then what happened is that anytime there was a hitch, or anytime you're playing and a shader is compiling for the first time because it wasn't cached, it would show a loading screen and then it would stay for 2 seconds. It was really disruptive. Like, let's say I opened the pause menu for the first time, or I picked up an item and then the material for the sparklies was compiling. It was not a good thing. The other important thing to think about is where do you want to check that shader's compiling. So maybe at the level loading. In my case, what made more sense is that Lyra has an experience manager component. Every level pretty much has an experience, and it was already set up with this nice interface that Lyra's common loading screen provides. So if I navigate to it, so F12, so it's an interface for things that might cause loading to happen, which requires a loading screen to display. So any of those things could give a reason why they should show the loading screen, and it's really nice, actually. So in my case, I just edited this one. So it still had its old logic, like just to make sure that the experience is loaded and it's ready. And I just added this here and just made sure that it only happens once. So I added a bool. So are we done? So you just want to do that once per level load, pretty much. Yeah, and then I updated my shader progress. Essentially, my shader progress is just a float. So anytime that component ticked, I just make sure that I haven't already done my initial shaders and that I am loaded. Yeah, this is just my logic for updating that number. Every tick I update pretty much just to have a percentage of, okay, how many shaders did I do, how many are left, and that's all my logic. Okay, and then this is being called by the loading screen manager, so that it pretty much asks this component, hey, should I still show the loading screen? And then it gets a boolean for, should I show the progress bar? And what is the progress? And in this case, I do update those values, and so the loading screen will know that it should update. So this logic is run here. So this is a long line of ifs. So it checks for any need to show the loading screen. This is where I used to have my logic, and then it would just show the loading screen all the time. In your own game, if you are based off of Lyra, you can just do those changes. If not, then I totally recommend you at least use the common loading screen plugin. It's quite nice. And you can set specific loading screens like I did for mine. And I set like a demo text. It's just nice to be able to set unique loading screen per maps or per experience. Yeah, and then if you have a component or if you have some logic, you can tell the loading screen manager to just show that progress bar because you're still compiling shaders. That's great. Here's my current loading screen. For the demo logic. So it was easy for me to set this one as part of an experience. And yeah, you can see it is that experience definition, and I could just set what loading screen widget that I want. So yeah, another point for Lyra for being awesome and modular. And now I really hope that whoever opens up my build, that the shaders don't take too long and they're reassured by the progress bar, and I hope to make it as awesome and fun as other games have had. So there's a lot of things I could do with this loading screen to make it more interesting than just a loading bar. So yeah, I hope that was useful for you and your future builds, and that you will start considering PSO and start digging it a little bit. I know I'm still just digging in, but I'm really happy to have this shader loading screen now. As always, thanks for watching, and thank you so much, Patreons, and see you in the next one.